We're back. It's goal-oriented episode. I don't even know anymore. This is going to be the recruiting transfer portal podcast, I guess. I'm joined by OU Daily sports editors Mason Young and Colton Sulley. OU lost to Texas Tech last time before, or I guess after last time we were on here. Who cares? Their team's bad. Went 6-6. They're going to the Cheez-It Bowl. They're playing a really good Florida State team. They're probably going to get smashed. What's been happening in the last few weeks?
Yeah, just been chilling. A lot of transfer portal entries. Obviously, a lot of rosters shake up around the country, but especially in Norman. More to come. Obviously, Austin Stogner announced he's coming in today. So just day by day watching the portal stuff and looking forward to this Cheez-It Bowl game where number 13 Florida State's probably going to steamroll OU, like you said. But
Mason found out what Austin Stogner's nickname was today.
Uh-oh.
Apparently his nickname is Big Joker?
Big Joker. Okay.
That's what Marvin and all the other players commenting on his tweet were saying.
Interesting.
But yeah, like you alluded to, Colton, there's been 17 OU players that have entered the portal. But it really right now, Theo Weiss only feels like the real major loss.
I would agree.
Even he was really hit or miss this season. So they're in good shape. They just need to add, but we'll get into who they might add soon.
Sure.
For sure. So I think obviously just right off the bat, two pretty glaring positions that this team needs, especially given, if Marvin Mims decides to go to the NFL, receiver is going to get hit really hard. And obviously defensive line. You can always, add in that department, but specifically with this team, just with how bad that interior room has been this season and some of the guys you lose, definitely need to add a lot in that room. And that's been pretty evident by some of the known offers that have been, discovered on Twitter about some of the recruits that OU's offered. I think they've offered, 4 receivers already, and the portal only opened December 5th. Offered a few defensive linemen in there. So it's pretty obvious that those are the two spots that they know they need to go hit on. And, who are some of those guys that we know OU has offered? Obviously, there's so much talent. I think this is maybe the craziest transfer portal year we've ever seen, just given the COVID year and, seeing what happens after that with how many more players are in college football just in general. But, who are some of the guys that we're seeing OU really, go after just in terms of from what we can know?
Yeah, well, before we get into those, the Stogner one's huge. We talked about tight end being a position of need, probably the most position of need, I think, in the spaces. But, yeah, receivers also with Theo gone and maybe Jalil, who knows, as it's only December 8th and the portal opened December 5th. But Stogner's a huge pickup, in my opinion. I think that's going to be huge. It's definitely a need. Hole on the roster. So, but Mason, who are some of those receivers that you think could be a difference maker that OU could go after in the portal?
Well, the two guys I think that I've heard most talked about so far that they've offered is Dante Cephas and then Rara Thomas, however you say that guy's name. Dante Cephas played against OU last year with Kent State and really didn't play all that well, but they must have seen something they liked. And that was an avenue that they've used previously. Because obviously, OU had Jeffrey Johnson this year. He played against them last year and fared pretty well in that game. Now, we can deliberate however much you want about what his contributions were to the success of the team this season, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that sometimes, you have a good opportunity when you play against a player to scout them up front. So, this guy had 744 yards and 3 touchdowns this season. Averages 15.5 yards a catch. Those aren't bad peripherals.
Take that.
Yeah, because when you look at the room right now, Jalil Farouk, it sounds like, is going to be back, and hopefully he can emerge as a wide receiver 1. You're kind of on the fence about whether or not Drake Stoops or Marvin Mims is coming back.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you've got a lot of guys that are really inexperienced. We think Nick Anderson could be pretty good, but he missed the entire season due to injury. And Jaden Gibson had some really limited action this season. So,
we're going to talk about this later, but how big is a receivers coach timing of hiring a receivers coach trying to get these receivers in the portal, you think?
Yeah, I think it's I don't know how big of a deal it is for right now. I think obviously now that LaDainian Washington, the interim coach, has been out on all.
He's been on the trail.
Been all on these trails. Not necessarily hitting these portal guys, but hitting some of the current recruits. And now that in-home visits we're in that period of the NCAA timeline where coaches are just all over the trail, just visiting, doing the in-home, I guess, sort of country road style. But there's just, I think one of the things that's pretty glaring to me about some of these receiver offers is, I guess, just the production. All these guys, not necessarily the most highly recruited out of high school, but all of them have been productive in college, especially when there's guys, in the portal right now, like JoJo Earl, Christian Leary, some really high-end recruits from Bama, and maybe some of these other spots that maybe aren't necessarily getting looked at by OU specifically. I wonder if, just the consistent production's playing a role for what they want to do. But, I think that's something that could be something to look for, is they are thinking about, what they've been able to do in college first, not necessarily the talent, I guess. Right,
and I think that's important. You look at another guy like Rara Thomas. I mean, he had over 600 yards and 7 touchdowns this season. When you look at the receivers that they got in the portal last season, now obviously that was different circumstances, and they kind of had to take what they could get. But J.J. Hester, L.V. Bunkley Shelton, those guys hadn't actually produced that much elsewhere, and they didn't, as a result, didn't produce much this year. So, yeah, it looks like there's a very concerted effort here to go get some guys that are a little bit more proven.
And I think that's important because, I think OE might have a chance at some of these higher-end receivers in this year's portal class compared to last year, just because there's such an obvious need for receivers in a pretty open spot to, instantly coming in and contributing, rather than last season when, you have Theo Weiss, Marvin Mims, and you got Drake Stoops and Jalil, and you have a pretty, solidified receiver room, and those guys are maybe more project style kind of additions. But yeah, I mean, all of these guys. Then Dorian Singer, he's an Arizona transfer. He has actually a pretty interesting story. He was initially a walk-on there, but played his way into being one of their best offensive players, and him and his recruiting is blown up. He's getting offers from basically everywhere. So is Dante Cephas. Trey Harris, he had a big year at Louisiana Tech. And all 4 of those guys have been super productive, and I think it's pretty obvious that OU is getting after them early here in this transfer portal window. Offers 3 days after they officially entered. I think that pretty much shows that how serious they are about solidifying that receiver room and trying to get some of those higher end guys in the class overall. But yeah, so talked about receivers right off the bat, but obviously OU's playing in this Cheez-It Bowl, if you care about it or not. So a few weeks ago from a Zoom that looked like Brent Venables was he's obviously on the trail, but looked like he was in a gas station.
He was at a rest stop at some point. I don't know if it was an airport thing or a gas station or what it was.
It was weird. I mean, you appreciate him taking the time, but
for sure,
he only got to answer 5 questions.
Him and Mike Norvell was literally in the passenger seat of a car. Answering questions.
So they talked on Zoom. Colton and Mason, they were both in that. Thankfully, I got a little bit of rest time on that Sunday, which was pretty nice. But what were the takeaways from that? Obviously, he talked on who's going to opt out of the game, and what other takeaways did he say that could make this game important at all?
Well, that was the big deal, was the opt-outs for the bowl game. I think Eric Gray, Anton Harrison, Wanye Morris, and Jalen Redmond.
Yep.
3 of those guys are declared for the draft. Brent had said previously that he wasn't the biggest fan of opt-outs, so it kind of took me by surprise that those guys didn't really announce it on Twitter or anything. We just got on that Zoom call on Sunday, and Brent came out of the gate saying, these are the guys that aren't going to play in the bowl game, and he didn't really make a big deal out of it. So I thought that was interesting. But I think in this bowl game, what you're going to see is a lot of younger guys that didn't get playing time, especially on the offensive line with Wanye and Anton not playing. Yeah, those are big spots for guys to step up, and that offensive line is going to be something to watch in the bowl game. So that's really what I took away from it, was just the more of the roster turnover and the guys going to the draft and opting out of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, he talked about that. The phrase he used was baptized quickly.
Yeah.
To talk about the offensive line and guys like Tyler Guyton that played a little bit this season but are going to get even more reps.
I'm thinking
sliding
of,
in
the
there at
Jakes.
tackle. Yeah, Jacob Sexton, Jake Taylor definitely will probably have some more opportunities in that bowl game. And then at running back, we've already seen what Javonte Barnes can do, but he's obviously probably going to get the lion's share unless Marcus Major is 100%. But I think a couple other things you look at is how, if at all, does Gavin Sawchuk contribute, and what does that mean for him moving forward? But then also, can Marcus Major kind of end the season on a high note after battling the ankle sprain the entire season? Can he have a good game and get some momentum for the next year? Now, that said, feels like he does that every year. I think like back in the Cotton Bowl in like 2020, he rushed for like 140 yards or something like that, and everybody's like, all right, this guy's going to be pretty good this year. Then he was suspended for like the first 6 games, and I'm trying to remember what I think he fared pretty well in last year's bowl game as well, if I remember correctly. But
I think that's right.
But yeah, I mean, you'll see if he plays well and decides to stick around, and maybe you can channel him into being the leader of your running back room next season, then that'd be great. But you'll just kind of play it by ear and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it just obviously for Marcus Major himself. I mean, obviously pretty disappointing for him, knowing how he started the season pretty well, but obviously lingering injuries really hurt his season, and then just the emergence of Eric Gray was huge. But yeah, I think it's the same old story for him. Just injuries, not really able to get up off the ground. But he seems like a guy that could very much enter the portal. We'll see. I mean, Javonte Barnes is, like you said, probably going to take a lot of the load on this bowl game, and looks like pretty much the starter going into next season. And Gavin Sawchuk, I think he's going to get some really good run. I think he can still play and still redshirt. I think it's pretty obvious what OU thinks of that running back room right now, just given we don't really have there isn't any known offers in the transfer portal for any running backs right now. You bring in Dalen Smothers, a freshman, Caleb Hicks, a freshman. You brought in Emeka Megwa, who's, like Mason pointed out earlier, 4-star from Washington, but I think he's a walk-on. But he's in the room, so you have a decent room. They're young, but they're super talented, and I think OU pretty much feels pretty good about that room and doesn't necessarily feel like they need to go out and add a whole lot. But yeah, it might be the Gavin Sawchuk show. I could think it could be something similar to what Jalil did last year, when Jalil had a pretty big bowl game and then had the year he had this year. I think that could be something similar for Gavin Sawchuk, who we know is a talented back.
Yeah, absolutely. You hope that happens. And in terms of other chatter from that media availability with Brent Venables, he also talked about the familiarity with this bowl. This used to be the the Russell Athletic Bowl, and the last time
World Bowl.
He played in this bowl last year with Clemson.
Yeah, which is funny enough. But obviously the game that people remember most is OU versus Clemson back at the end of the 2014 season. And that worked out with both teams. I mean, Clemson kind of became a dynasty and won 2 championships, and OU, no championships. But, hey, they made 3 college football playoffs and had a really good run with Lincoln and the Heisman winners, et cetera. So, he talked about using that testimony as, like, a parallel to show guys, like, hey, if you finish the season well, this is the type of things it can set up for the future. Or
even just because you made a bowl like the Cheez-It Bowl, that doesn't mean the next year you can't go out and make the playoff like that 2015 team did.
For sure.
That's kind of really how I saw it. Like, yeah, they got their ass beat 40-6 or whatever it was to Clemson, but like you said, Mason, 3 of the next 4 years or whatever it was, they made the playoff. So I think what Brent was saying is just like the future's bright. The future can be bright, even though we went 6-6 and made the Cheez-It Bowl. And
that's the biggest thing is what this game can do for next season, obviously, right? I mean, just thinking about it, that 2014 OU roster, there's a few years there where OU was a little bit down,
Yep.
And right next season, make the playoff, you're bringing Baker Mayfield, Lincoln Riley, and the trajectory of the program just completely flips.
Yep.
So that could definitely happen in this game. I think it helps OU knowing that they're going to play a talented Florida State team, and they're going to have young guys in a lot of these roles. We talked about a few other ones like Tyler Guyton, who played pretty well in a lot of the time he got this year. But Jacob Sexton is probably going to play left tackle in for Anton. And
it's going to be a really good test for those.
Yeah, and Chris Murray leaves next year. That's going to be another guard spot. And then on defense, it only makes sense to give a lot of these younger guys some run. you think about a lot of these young promising players like, Jaron Kanak and Robert Spears Jennings and Gentry Williams and, all sorts of guys like that.
Kobe,
and
the concrete in his helmet.
Yeah, Kobe McKenzie. And, who am I? Grayson Halton and R. Mason Thomas. All of those guys have shown stuff for this team this year as freshmen in a new spot, and that could be huge for their development, just like Brent said at that media thing. So I think that's really what you're looking for this program. And then, carrying some momentum into the offseason, you go get some good guys out of the portal, and you're right back in it. I mean, This team this year is, obviously is not what anyone expected. It's not acceptable for OU standards. But, they're a few plays away from having a much better record, and, they're a few talent additions and a few developments away from clearly being right back in it. I mean, Brent Venables bringing in 2 consecutive, high-end recruiting classes here. Obviously is capable of bringing in, all sorts of guys from the transfer portal. So that's gonna be huge.
Definitely. And the other thing that we kind of got out of that availability was Mike Norvell seems like a really cool dude. Had a lot of praise for Dylan Gabriel, but I think the bigger component of this was just him kind of giving some enlightenment about how Brent Venables can kind of whip this thing around because he's done it himself. They're in year 3 now. They're making a bowl for their first time, and they're ranked number 13 in the final college football playoff rankings. So
I think all three of those losses were by 1 possession or something.
Yeah, and they've won their last 5 games.
Beat LSU.
So there's been a lot of momentum here at the back part of the season. And so, he's just tried to instill a culture, and that's the same thing we've heard about Brent Venables all year is just him trying to not change even amid the chaos. That they've really focused on relationships at the beginning of things, and now they have an opportunity to really get more into the playbook and get into the nitty-gritty of things and try to do this thing the right way.
For sure, and I think obviously, we've talked about it before, but those extra practices are huge just because you have some of these transfer portal departures, and OU's going to have to rely on some of those guys that are a bit younger that haven't played as much in this game, and they're going to get a real opportunity. And, I think it's not even if they necessarily play the biggest amount of snaps in this bowl game, but just the thought of them getting first team, second team, not scout team snaps, at practice means a lot for freshmen. I mean, I always think to the Ted Roof quote where, reps are like gold for young players. So that's pretty interesting stuff. But I think we sort of hit on all of those, I guess, younger players that might be getting to play in that game. But we talked about some of the transfer portal receivers. Obviously, this team needs defensive linemen, like we said. But one of the biggest, I guess, developments in the transfer portal for OU so far seems to be the McCullough brothers. I think that's right. It might be McCullough. I'm not sure. But Day McCullough is a Cincinnati commit, or he was a Cincinnati commit. But he is a safety, and his brother, Dason, was an outside linebacker at Indiana, highly ranked 4-star, had a really, really good season, all freshman Big Ten, one of the higher rated guys per 24/7 in this cycle. But they're both taking visits this weekend, and that, I mean, Dason, if you watch his tape, just very obviously going to fit in perfectly at the cheetah role. I think that's pretty obvious why they went after him. You wonder if OU sort of was playing chess a few weeks ago when they randomly offered Dave McCullough, I'm just going to say McCullough, but they offered his little brother a few weeks ago who is in the 2023 recruiting class, like out of nowhere when he was still committed to Cincinnati. He seemed pretty fair. They had Fickle. Then, Fickle leaves. His brother enters the portal. Wonder if I could be speculating, but maybe
it's funny how things
work out like that. Maybe
somebody at OU know Fickle was going to Wisconsin.
Maybe they had a little bit of idea about what they were trying to do, but
those I also don't know that. Like, how do you expect that Dason is going to get in the portal? But that guy's a freak. He's 6'6" and has all the length in the world, and he can move. So
sure. Obviously, his dad. Their dad is the running backs coach at Notre Dame, but he was at Indiana this past season, just took that job at Notre Dame. And he also coached with Jay Valai with Kansas City of the NFL together. So there's the connection there. And there's a few other guys, maybe some you might be familiar with. Former Oklahoma State defensive end Trace Ford would probably be a good fit on this team.
Yep.
Obviously is,
They need an
preps guy.
impact pass rusher.
Yeah.
That's what that defensive line needs more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that just seems like an obvious fit. He's an Oklahoma guy
Experienced,
from
talented.
Edmond.
Oklahoma guy, yeah.
Yeah, and then Miles Slusher as well, who's from Broken Arrow.
Yeah.
Had a really weird development at Arkansas with what happened with him. I'll let you read on that one yourself because I'm not going to explain it very well enough. But he broke away from Arkansas, but he played a lot of snaps there. Obviously, like I said, from Broken Arrow, 4-star guy. So 2 talented in-state kids that are in the portal that have been really good.
You got to go get
those. Those are those are 2 needs that this team needs and 2 kids that they should have a role with for sure.
Yeah, 2 in-state kids, you have to have those. Talented, needs, like you said. I mean, there's really no excuse not to land those.
Yeah. But I think there continues to be, I mean, you're not going to find these elite defensive line guys in a portal, which is they go after Caleb Banks, who's 6'7". He's got an offer, 6'7", 300 pounds from Louisville, but he is a development pretty clearly. He hasn't played. Then they have Braden Fisk, who has 1 year left, but he was at Western Michigan. He's one of the best pass rushers, and they're in the MAC, right? But
yes.
he's really, really productive in his career, and he's gigantic. But he has, again, you have a productive interior defensive lineman. Yeah. He has offers from everywhere.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest pros of the portal is, like, instead of going to get a talented freshman that doesn't know what he's doing and never played college ball, you go get a guy that's played college ball for 3 years and started. And it's kind of like C.J. Colton when came in. He had played a lot of football, and he had a really good season this year. So I think that's one of the biggest pros of the portal is just getting guys that have been there, done that, and can hop right in and be productive.
Absolutely. And I think on the back end, it'll be interesting to see what they do as well. We've thought about the defensive line, linebackers, and you mentioned Miles Slusher as someone in the secondary, but I mean, you got Kyrie Jackson, who's out here in the portal. That's an Alabama transfer. He played for Jay Valai previously.
Yeah.
That to me feels like it should be a no-brainer that you go get an experienced guy from the secondary that. And I know they didn't have They didn't have any luck with Trey Morrison per se last semester as a grad transfer defensive back.
Yeah.
But they had great luck with C.J. Colton.
Yep.
And so if you can do something like that where you can replicate that, that would be a plus.
And a lot of guys are in the portal because they didn't play or they haven't played or they're not experienced. But if you can find those guys like Austin was saying that have played and are talented and from your state and have experience, that's better than finding a 5-star freshman that doesn't know the playbook and hasn't played college football before. I think that's just a plus.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few types of players in the portal. You have the Alabama type players like Kyrie Jackson who haven't played and are trying to go find a new home to play. Yeah. You have guys like we mentioned earlier, like Dante Cephas and Trey Harris who come from mid-major program or not mid-major but Group of 5 programs that are trying to go play against more competitive teams. Sure. And it's just it's and then you have guys I guess are in trouble, but those are sort of the guys you have in the portal, and usually, you always talk about recruit your own problems. The types of high-end talent in this class specifically is really not that great, and not a huge amount of just go out there and be studs type
there's
of guys.
No Caleb
there's
Williams
a lot of
out there.
There's obviously lots of contributors, but yeah, I mean the defensive line is scary. I mean Josh Ellison leaves. He wasn't necessarily a huge guy for you, but that's depth at a position that you need. And he's a guy that's at least playable. You lose Jeffrey Johnson. I think OU's going into this bowl game with Jordan Kelly, who may or may not come back. He has an extra year. Jeffrey Johnson, who's out of eligibility. And Isaiah Coe's coming back. Kelvin Gilliam's coming back, but he's hurt. He hasn't played all year. And then Corey Robertson, who hasn't played all year, and we imagine he's redshirting. Those are the 5 guys you got right now. And
Grayson Halton.
And Grayson Halton, who he plays defensive tackle, but he played end earlier in the year. So you have 5 guys in that room, and 2 of them are hurt. So they desperately need guys inside that, and they pretty much have to take whoever they can get.
You almost feel bad for Jordan Kelly. He's probably gonna have to play just about every snap in that game.
Oh yeah,
and him and Isaiah.
He started playing well down the stretch too.
And they're both been playing well, but that's all they got.
That's pretty much all they have. Yeah,
like Jeffrey Johnson, and I think what we're learning about some of that position, Jeffrey Johnson had all sorts of offers last year, and he's been good, but not necessarily doing a whole lot.
I think that's what we're learning about the portal too.
It's like
we'll see as the years go by, like which all these guys that are getting so many offers, and then like you said, just don't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, like last year was sort of like an anomaly. I mean, USC picks up Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams, but I don't think that's going to be what we see every year, and it just seemed like that might be the thing because of what people were trying to speculate about NIL, and then also that was really the first year of like the gigantic sweepstake portal. So,
I think you're going to see less guys get in the portal at some point, like down the line, like in a couple years, because not all these guys are landing places. Number one, and then number two, Jeffrey Johnsons of the world or whatever. I think in the long run, some of those players are probably better off staying and developing their stuff at one school. But
so we've covered some of those guys, but for what matters now, we're not going to the Cheez-It Bowl. Couldn't quite sum up the cash for that one just because, again, interest, all the best players aren't playing. Can probably cover what we need to from home. Just, always looking to serve our audience in the best interest, but also be smart about it. And not sure anyone's really dying for some Cheez-It Bowl content, especially with all of OU's best players not playing. I think everyone's pretty concerned with recruiting right now rather than, this bowl game. But yeah, we're going to cover this game remote. And we're going to, do some predictions real quick, if that's even possible, because I don't really know much about Florida State. I think maybe their two best defenders aren't playing, but
I know Jordan Travis is going to run all over.
OU's probably.
Defense.
Yeah.
Is Jared Verse playing?
I think he isn't.
So. Oh, yeah. Because I was going to say, if he got to play, good luck to Tyler Guyton.
Good luck to freshman Jake Sexton, if that was
whoever. Yeah, that'd be rough. But, I mean, to the point of, we're not going right, I think people will thank us in the future when the Daily is able to cover SEC games on the road because we have the budgetary space for that. So
for sure, saving some money.
And we know that you guys that are listening to this would rather just have the portal news anyway. So
for sure. All right, who's going first on their bold game picks?
You got it.
Me? Okay. Man, bowl games are disgusting, especially Cheez-It Bowl with a bunch of opt-outs. But I'm gonna go 37-23 Florida State. I think Jordan Travis just goes off. He had a heck of a year. I think Mike Norvell's building something there. I think they're pumped to even be in a bowl game for the first time in 5 seasons or whatever it is since Willie Taggart, I think. But yeah, I'm going Florida State over OU in the Cheez-It Bowl. Hopefully Michael Turk gets to stay in his hotel room, the NIL Cheez-It.
That'd be sick. I want the Turk vlog of Turk and Danny Stutzman staying in that room. I'm gonna take the over here. I'll go with Florida State 45, OU 24. And I know that seems like a lot, and I don't really know relative to the season just exactly how good Florida State's offense has actually been. But for all the reasons we just highlighted, I mean, I think you're going to be able to run at will against that defensive front, and that's probably exactly what they want to do.
Yep.
So so I think for those reasons, I think OU's offense will be handicapped by not having Eric Gray. We've mentioned the talent of Javante Barnes, but Eric Gray was just automatic this season, and I feel like that's really hard to replicate, especially when you don't get game reps for an entire month, and then you try to come back and play. Yeah. So I think that's kind of some of the things at play in what I'm picking, but I think Florida State will put up a lot of points, and I think OU will struggle to catch up.
Yeah, Florida State enters this game with 5 straight wins. All 3 of their losses, I'm pretty sure, against ranked opponents. They're in the middle of the season. I think they had 3 straight losses.
Yeah, here it is. 3 straight.
Yeah, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson.
And again, 2 of them were by 1 possession.
Yeah, 1 possession losses to 2 pretty decent teams. They're a good football program. They have a ton of talent. Jordan Travis has been good this year. Obviously, they're hot, and they're ready to be in a bowl game just in general. They haven't been in a few years now. OU's playing without some of their most important players. I can't really. Part of me has a weird feeling OU's just gonna do some weird, magical thing and beat Florida State, but also
Could happen.
I
Do it.
don't.
Take it.
A lot of people
Should
thought.
I? You know what? I'm gonna do it. Yeah. Why not? Who cares?
I mean, think about it from this
I picked
perspective.
the Bedlam one.
Like last year, like OU had like 4 future NFL players on the defense that opted out, right? And everybody's like, oh, they were gonna get slapped, and then they just smashed Oregon.
And who knows who else will opt out for Florida State? I mean, we just don't know.
Yeah. So let's do it. I'm gonna go OU. I'm gonna go OU 31, Florida State 28. Sure, why not?
Give me a 3-point game.
Give me
in the Cheez-It Bowl.
And then Brent Venables is gonna get the Cheez-It bath.
Yeah.
That'll be fun.
And he's probably gonna. It's probably kind of demeaning to be like, oh, you won. I got Cheez-It bathed, but
Yeah.
Well, you asked this earlier.
I think Dabo
or
got
You
it
asked
last
this
year.
recently. Does Brent Venables know what a Cheez-It is?
oh, 100. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. Does he?
Well, there's like hundreds of them around the facility now because Turks was throwing them around in his vlog,
that's
so he
true.
probably knows by
He
now. But
just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that eats snacks.
yeah,
I don't know why, but
don't know.
Anyway, well, Mason, this is our last game we're covering with the Daily. Our game in Texas Tech was our last road game or last real game to cover. Such a weird last game to cover. We at one point joked like, OU's going to be 5-6 going to Lubbock, and OU's going to lose and not be bowl eligible, and our final game is going to be in Lubbock. Well, it kind of is, but this team's in a bowl game at least.
Yep.
But yeah, Colton taking over the reins next year most likely. He's the one of us that's going to be here. So yeah, he's going to do great next year. We're going to come back with one more goal-oriented cinder out for the year after the bowl game, after we get all of these transfer portal additions sorted out, and after signing day, because those are some big things coming up. But we're going to recap all those here in a few weeks, and I guess maybe talk about the Cheez-It Bowl if you care. But that's been it for this latest episode of Goal Oriented. As always, thanks to Colin, our producer over there, doing his thing and setting up all this gear that we don't know how to do. So anyway, that's been it for this episode of Goal Oriented. Always check out OUdaily.com for all your needs, even if you're a basketball fan, because basketball fans getting rolled up and we're getting that coverage going, and women's basketball and all the spring sports going out. But we appreciate you joining us. Soon. Oh, yeah, softball season. But anyway, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.